but we can see me on here. So why don't we switch this out? And we'll use yours, and I will sit in the corner of our laptop and see.
Sorry, it's not a touch screen.
It's not a touch screen. Karen Bigelman is live now, and they're martyrs. Okay.
Someone joined.
Okay.
Sorry, we had some technical difficulties. It says that there are 3 people in.
Okay, I'm gonna get in there in a second.
David Cook says he can see me.
Great. Make sure that my settings are not muted.
Where would I do that?
I have absolutely no idea.
Okay, I'll just
click on things until something happens.
Thanks.
You're welcome. I want to be helpful. Okay, and I'm going to mute your laptop so we're not getting an echo.
Did that successfully mute?
Continue to refresh the page.
Click there.
Go to your class. I'll figure it out. Go ahead. I got it. Figure it out.
Okay. So can people hear me? Yes? No?
I can see and hear you.
Good. Okay. So, not at all flustered by that. I think I should get started with my class. Hi, I'm Yaakov Ben-Harav Eliezer. I've been doing archery in the SCA for 17 years, something like that. And now, a couple of years ago, I was at the archery range and I was working on how I aimed for long-distance shoot, and the landed baron said, so what are you doing? How does that work? And I wanted to give my usual flippant answer, aiming is an advanced concept, come back to it, but, well, he wasn't in a beginning archer, he was an intermediate archer, and he was the landed baron, so I should be a little more respectful from that. And I said, that's longer than I can answer right now, I'll make a class out of that. So this is the 3rd time I've taught the class. He still hasn't managed to attend. But that's the backstory. So I have handouts. Here, have some handouts. Oh, that's not going to work. Karen, could you send out the links?
I have links, but they're in my email, which is on that computer. I'll find it. Don't worry about it.
Let me see if I can find...
I'll find the links, don't worry.
Yeah, I don't stand a chance on... We had to switch computers for technical reasons. So it's... Aiming is an advanced concept, so I'm going to go over why I say that, and some of the less advanced concepts, and how they fit together. And then we're going to talk about what I think aiming is. And then I'm going to talk about what I think people mean when they talk about aiming. And one of the confusing things about aiming as a topic is that most people have a concept in their head for what they mean when they say aiming. And most people's are different from each other. And so it's even trying to come up with a definition of what I mean by my terms was a process, and different people can disagree with me. So, the basics. What I mean by... Did we get the handouts?
I'm working on it.
Sorry.
I'm going to post them in the notes, in the file section of the page, so go look for them there.
Okay, they're going to be posted in the file section of the page. As soon as she finds it, she will probably also add it to the chat.
I will if I can. I don't know if I can drop a link in the chat. If I can, I will. In my handout, I say that I define the basics as the core details of shooting that we were taught on the first day, or the first time we shot, hopefully, and that we're still trying to master. We're all still trying to master. Things like a comfortable stance, a clear but not too tight grip on the bow, smooth release, not plucking, and there are a lot of these, and they're overwhelming, and you kind of have to do all of them to actually be shooting. So we teach them on the first day, even though there's a lot of work there, and we work on it, and we're still working on it. No one's ever going to be perfect at all of these things, but before it really makes sense to start thinking about what you're doing with aiming, you kind of have to be doing them consistently, as in the same every time, and deliberately, as in doing them a particular way because that's the way you chose to do them, as opposed to it being just kind of what happened and you've never even noticed. And that's consistency shot to shot, like, do you take out your arrow and put it on the bow and shoot and grab another arrow and put it on the bow and shoot? Or do you grab an arrow and come back and do the little dance and then get yourself set up and shoot and then grab another arrow and do your little dance and get yourself... That's consistency shot by shot. Or end to end. Slow down. End to end, that's like... Are you facing the target the same way every time? Or sometimes you're standing very flat to the target. Sometimes you're with your back to the target. So are you consistent about those every time you get up to the line? That's end to end. Day to day, are you working on the same things? Are you making progress this practice and the next practice and the practice? Or is every time you come to the archery range, you're thinking about it anew? And there's not much to say. Someone could do an advanced class on each of these, from foot position to how you hold your hips, to how you adjust your hips, to the back muscles and making sure that you're pulling with your back, to elbow positioning so you don't hit yourself and so that you don't collapse as you're shooting, to the grip on the bow. You could teach an advanced class on each of these. But the fundamentals, at least in order to move on to aiming, you don't have to have taken those advanced classes. You just have to have do something consistently because it's what you chose to do. This can often make the biggest difference to your score. I remember a story many years ago. We were at a fairly large regular practice, and Peter the Red was teaching the beginners every time, and he would give a speech, and all the advanced archers would kind of tune him out, and when he was done, we would all get back to shooting. And then we said, well, we could kind of use a change of pace, and we've got a bunch of intermediate archers here. Let's get Master Igraine of Kelswood, Grandmaster Bowman, in to do a special class. Maybe she has something else, a different message for us that will help our intermediate archers. And we had her in, and she went through down the line, and she watched each of us shoot, and she gave us a feedback, and it was the same things. It was the same things that Peter would say to new archers. It was, are you anchoring on your face, or are you kind of hanging out in midair? Are you releasing cleanly, or are you plucking? Are you doing pinky and thumb, or does your hand kind of change shape all the time while you're holding the string? She'd point one of those out, and it was something that we had all heard a million times, but having someone say, that basic, you should work on that basic. It can really help. All of us got significantly better over the course of that one day of practice, thanks to her teaching. And she said nothing that Peter hadn't said to us 100 times. But sometimes hearing it from a different person or focusing on it differently can really make a big difference. Okay, so you've got your basics, you're doing the same thing every time, and you're doing it on purpose. So now the next concept is a group, right? If your arrows are going everywhere, then aiming isn't terribly helpful, because even if you got it on the target, some of them would be on the target, some of them wouldn't, if you're hitting this broadside of a barn. So all that consistency has to be adding up to a group on the target. Or not on the target, somewhere. A group. Bunch of arrows ending up in the same spot. That's what I mean by a group. Which can bring us to adjusting. Adjusting is the deliberate choices and techniques that we make to move where our group ended up. So, a technique of adjustment is to say, my group ended up to the left, so I'm going to move to my right. I'm going to shift my entire body over to move that target. The other common one is if my group is too low, I tilt the entire body up. If my group is too high, I tilt the entire body down. That is called the teapot. And it is not people's first instinct for how you move a group up and down. Their first instinct is that you up, down, up. Now the problem with that first instinct, is that as you move your hand up, your draw length changes. And so you're not carefully controlling one thing. You're messing around with all the different things. The most dramatic is the draw length change, but also the weight in your shoulders and your elbow, all kinds of things change. So, strongly recommend the teapot, but when I say adjusting, I mean that entire set of tools. Okay, so what do I mean by aiming? I mean by aiming deciding how much of the tools of adjusting to use based on where your arrows are ending up. So that this motion is adjusting in the form of teapot. I'm saying I think I need to adjust that much because my arrows ended up a little too high is aiming. Okay, so how can you aim? That's we've come to the crux of the question. How can you aim? So the first answer, and the answer you've been using since your first day on the range, is a technique called instinctive shooting. And instinctive shooting works, as far as I can tell, exactly the way that aiming works when throwing a ball. You can talk about how pitchers have better aim than I do, but you can't really say anything about how you aim. You just practice and you throw in the way that will hit the person or the thing you're trying to hit. It comes from your brain synthesizing the hundreds of different choices that go into this action and picking a path that will work pretty well. This is amazing. It is mind-boggling that this is possible. It is also, in fact, what we all really do, because most of the time we're not paying attention, or we're speed shooting and it's going too fast, or we don't have time to do anything else, or we're focused on getting one of the basics right, so we don't have time. Instinctive is what we actually do. Instinctive has a problem, though. Well, it has one other cool factor. People who have really good instincts can do amazing things, like just shoot ambidextrously, pick up equipment they've never shot before, and do a decent job. These are really cool properties. It has a problem. And its problem is when push comes to shove and the instincts aren't working for you, what do you do? So you're at the tournament and you shot your first arrow at this target and it went too high. Now what? You can relax and try to focus and pretend it doesn't matter, and those are all really important things, but either the instincts come back or they don't. So it would be nice to have something more quantitative, something we could point to say what we're doing. So I'm going to get distracted by one other technique. We don't see it so much in the SCA. In some kingdoms it's not legal even, but you hear about it occasionally. It's called string walking. And string walking is kind of a tool for adjustment. The idea is if you're aiming too high, then with the arrow here, and now I'm getting my geometry confused, just move it up on the string till it's somewhere that hits the target. And this has advantages in that it can mean that your sight picture is the same no matter what target you're shooting at. It has a lot of disadvantages. It only works for short ranges. It kind of begs the question, so where on the string should I put my knock so that I can aim right? What happens when it's not working? How do I readjust? That's why it's interrupting and coming first. So we're not doing string walking. We've practiced our instinctive as much as we can, but we're ready for something better. So there's one range where everything's really simple, and that has a name. The name is point blank. And you hear that in popular culture to mean you just shoot it and you don't think about it. And people assume that means very close. And so sometimes you hear it mean that. But the other thing it could mean is, and I think this is one of the files that got shared, is...
I'm going to make sure it gets shared right now.
Oh, did they not get shared yet?
The other one did. I don't know if that one got shared because
Okay.
I was having trouble with the picture.
If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I just thought you guys might be able to see this. This is just a picture I took of the archery range at our local practice. And so you've got ground and trees and targets, and I'm only sharing the picture because I don't know how blurry this is coming out. So there is some magic range. Oh, by the way, this is my other prop. This is the picture of a bow, Peter the Red's Wilson Brothers Black Widow, to be precise, as seen by a right-eye dominant, right-handed archer. It flips for left-eye dominant, left-handed archers. The concepts are similar for crossbow, but I happen to be a right-eye dominant, right-handed bow archer, so that's what you get. Okay, so there's our field. If we aim by what, we don't know what we mean by that yet, but so that the point of the arrow goes on the target, like so, and we get perfect golds every time, or our group is centered around the gold because our basics aren't so perfect, that is called point blank. And it has the advantage that, as far as I can tell, any definition of aiming will think about that point exactly the same, which is really convenient. So that's point blank. So you're not at point blank. You've tried point blank, and it's gone a little to the left and too far down. Now what do you do? So a lot of people's first instinct is they say, okay, here's my target. If aiming there didn't work, then let me try aiming there, and it'll go in. This is laminated, so I get to demonstrate that. They pick a point out in the world. Here. X marks the spot. The glare is perfect for that. And they say, okay, if I aim at that point, I will get golds. And so they put the point of their arrow right there. The glare is not helpful for that. Let's see if we can get that to work better. Point of the arrow right on the random X they've imagined in the world, and they get golds. Or they don't, and if they don't, they move that X. They say, I'm going to put the point of my arrow somewhere else in the world. This is called, well, everyone just calls it aiming, because that's the field we're in. But I am going to classify it as point of aim. Sometimes I've heard that term used for it. That has a bunch of advantages. It works, and, well, it works, and it can deal with all kinds of weird circumstances. It has a kind of big disadvantage, which is, A, that X is imaginary, and B, the leaf you pointed at is different on every different target, on every field. So you're on a roving range and you get to the next target, and you're like, what leaf am I supposed to point at? So we need to do better than that somehow. The next thing you hear people say, okay, I'm not going to remember that X out here in the world worked just fine, but I'm not interested in that. That doesn't work when I go to the next target. So I'm not going to keep track of an X. I'm going to keep track of, like, an arrow, right? And I'm going to move things so that it's easier to see. Different target, let's say. I'm keeping track of an arrow there. Can you see that? And what means the same thing. You put the point of the point directly on the glare. You put the point directly on the target. Point directly on the point, and the arrow goes into the center of the target. But the advantage is that this imaginary arrow out in the real world should have approximately the same shape and size if you go to the next target or the next event. So people can try and get a sense of, oh, okay, so at 30 yards, I want to go down 2 feet and over a foot. That'll work for me. This is great. That is, as much as anybody calls it anything aside from aiming, they call it gap shooting. So I was taught by my teacher, Peter the Red, who I think is in the chat,
Yes.
Another strategy that has the same mechanics, but has a lot of advantages. So here's the difference. Instead of marking this, I'm going to mark this, right? So I shoot glare right on the target. It doesn't go in the right place. Let's say it goes too high. So I said I had lined up with the arrow. Well, why not line up with that? Or this corner here? I pick a point there. There's my point, right? And now I can say, when I line that point up with the target, I get golds.
You've been asked how this technique would work with crossbow.
So, the details are a little different, and I'm less experienced with crossbow, but you see the same kinds of conversations in crossbow. You see people saying, oh, I'm aiming at that leaf, which suggests that they're using a point of aim mental model. You see people saying, oh, it's more like 1.5 feet over the target, which means that they're using a gap type model. And you see people with sights or with similar conceptions where they say, oh, okay, if I line the prod up with the target, it goes right in. Or if I I think front sights aren't allowed and back sights are. If I look through this point on my back sight, then my crossbow is at the right angle. The details are all different, but the concepts are the same. Does that answer your question? We'll hear back from you shortly. I'm going to assume that answered your question and say, okay, so if, let's say, I moved it, that point there, the head of the arrow, was to, now I'm going to get my head to hurt. This is the disadvantage is that it takes some thinking. That was too high on the target. I can move it down on the target by lining up something higher. So I'll try that. And if that point doesn't work, is too low on the target, I can move it down. And eventually I'll find a spot. Right? Some bows, like this Wilson Brothers Black Widow, which was used, not this one specifically, but this model was designed for the 68 Olympics, kind of have a built-in system right there. So when I was shooting this bow, did not have to do anything to record what I had decided. I just remembered which line lined up for different ranges, different distances. On a previous bow, I took a piece of masking tape, put it there, and put colored bars, and just remembered, the top of the red bar was this range. When I got this bow, this is shot trainer irrelevant stuff, after, unfortunately, the Black Widow wore out, I put lines, just with a Sharpie, on my bow. That one there, which you can't see because of the glare, is the one that started this whole class, because I was calibrating that line for, I think, 100 yards, and the Baron asked me, "What are you doing to your bow?" And I had to, so that's what this class was from. Something I did to figure out these lines is I used a little triangle of electrical tape. And then when it turned out it was in the wrong spot, I could just move it around until I found the right spot. Turned out after I'd replaced the electrical tape twice, it was still in the same spot. So I just marked the bow. But do what you need to. I've since changed arrows, and the marks now mean different things, but they actually end up being pretty close to okay, so I've left them. I call that the right way of shooting, or Peter the Red's method, because I don't have a more authoritative way of naming it, but if other people have heard other terminologies, I'm all ears. And I probably went way too fast there. So do people have questions? Do people have things they want to bring up?
We're on a slight delay,
Okay.
so you might get questions in a couple of minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Because on my screen, you're still talking.
I'm hanging around quietly.
Someone says it's called limb marks.
Yes. Limb marks is a good piece of terminology. Yes. And where everyone just calls everything aiming, I've heard limb marks. Limb marks, I imagine, is more being referred to the actual marks I put on the bow as opposed to the technique that uses them, but everything's just called aiming. So limb marks is a great name. Thank you. I will add that to my notes.
There's questions about, someone recommends that you can use 1/16 graphic tape and it works really well.
Okay.
Someone else
1/16 graphic tape, according
limb
to...
markings are okay for competition.
Yes. Limb markings are considered okay for competition. Some sites on crossbows are okay. You'll have to talk to your local captive marshal. Hopefully house-trained marshal at this point. But
apparently limb markings are period.
yes. So that's the other thing about our arbitrary rules about what is and isn't allowed on the archery range. Almost everything is, in fact, period and documentable. Front sights are definitely documentable for crossbows. Metal fletchings are definitely documentable. I don't know that metal bolts are, but probably, considering the size of crossbows they made. I don't know that split prods are, but I wouldn't be surprised. Just about everything we ban, somebody has done in period. So we make arbitrary rules because they make us safer, or they make us more consistent, or that's just the game we play. But yes, almost everything we do is period, which is kind of mind-boggling. They were so clever.
Just waiting to see if we get more questions.
Yeah, I'm babbling to see if we get more questions.
Because there's a time gap.
Mm-hmm.
Peter says that he writes his name on a piece of tape.
Okay.
Limb marks are very useful for people who are sight impaired or short-sighted archers.
Yeah.
That can be very helpful. I
Yes.
know I often have trouble at longer distances, even seeing the target.
Right.
So, I don't know if they can hear me.
Let us know if you can hear Karen, who's kibitzing in the background. But yes, one of the nice things about limb markers is that they're fairly close to you, so if your vision doesn't let you actually see the target, it can be easier to focus on than trying to identify which leaf you were looking at last time. Yeah, it's a good point. Also, an example of where underneath it all we're really using instinctive and the magical things instinctive can do. You are not... The people who are getting really tight groups at 60 yards, or 80 yards, or the people who are getting all of their arrows on the target at 100 yards, are using these tools, but it's the instinct that's getting them the rest of the way. There are 100 different things you could do wrong, and it is improbable to imagine that you are getting them all correct enough, 6 arrows in a row, to have a really tight group. What is more plausible is that thanks to instinctive shooting, when you mess up one, you're also messing up some other in a corresponding direction. That I often find that I jerk my bow one way or the other when I shoot. I often find that when I do that really bad, I also pluck. They often compensate for each other, which is kind of frustrating because if I consciously fix one, my shooting gets worse. Because for some reason, even though I consciously can't get the shoulder in the right position, the plucking motion comes out when the shoulder's in the wrong position. So that's the magic instinctive gives us sometimes.
There's a suggestion to alternate colored tapes on the bow.
Mm-hmm.
Someone said they do yellow for even yardages and red for odd yardages.
That is very clever. If you aren't lucky enough to have a bow that's pre-marked, people are suggesting using colors, differential cover colors for your markings, so that it's easier to remember which one's which. For example, even and odd colored markings. Yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. Oh, so the other thing that I forgot to mention earlier is the other reason this is an advanced topic. So reason one why it's an advanced topic is that if you don't have a grouping, you can't talk about how you're aiming until you have a grouping. That's one. Two, second reason you can't is because if you can't tell whether you're doing the basics right, and by right I mean the way you intended to, then you can't tell if you have kept them right while you aimed. If you don't have an anchor point, if every time you shoot it's different, then you don't know that when you did a teapot, in fact threw off your anchor point. You just, there's no way to fix that. There's nothing to fix, you haven't picked it yet. So that's the second reason it's an advanced topic, is there's a lot of things to go over beforehand. The third reason is that having decided to change something, you will mess up literally everything else. They say, I'm not sure I agree with it, but they say that an expert is somebody who can do a thing while thinking about it. They say you can mess up even professional tennis players, by asking them whether they breathe in or out while they serve. So, similarly, by asking how much do you need to teapot, you are going to mess up everything you did naturally before. All of those things are going to go out. And so you need to get to a level of, you need to bring back in the instinct, and you need to develop a level of mastery where you can think about whether all of your basics are working correctly and whether you adjusted as much as you intended to, while also, shooting well. And that's not an easy skill. Should have mentioned that earlier. Did things come in while I ranted about that?
Yeah, people were just talking about different parts of limb markings and how they work.
Mm-hmm.
And Ablin agrees with you that you can't adjust your aim until you're consistently hitting the same spot. Otherwise, you're chasing ghosts, which is a very lovely way to phrase it.
Chasing ghosts is a great way to phrase it. Chasing noise is a great way to phrase it, because that phrase is now usually used in statistics, but
there's a whole other topic.
But the statistical concept is copied from the archery concept. In fact, the original statistical paper where they started talking about regression to the mean and grouping and averages was talking about archery competitions. So it's all connected.
We're going to put out one last call for questions.
All right, one last call for questions. Standing here looking awkward.
Evelyn says she read that paper in school. You can talk about statistics more. Everyone likes that. Peter asks, how are you able to talk and type at the same time?
A little trick. I'm not typing. Karen's typing. I can't type at all. Certainly can't talk and type at the same time.
I think if we don't have any more questions, we'll wrap things up.
If we can figure out how. Thank you all, and thank you for putting up with our technical difficulties at the beginning. And I hope
if we do it again, it'll go a little bit more smoothly.
Hopefully, if we do it again, it'll go more smoothly.
Oh, we've got Forrester Elford points out that straight arrows are key for groupings.
Yes. So there are many, many things that are key for getting a good grouping, including making sure your equipment actually works and is consistent and good. And the quality of your arrows and the condition of your arrows are huge for that. So, yes, completely agree. Straight arrows makes a huge difference.
Everyone's
All right.
just saying thank you.
Everyone's saying thank you, so I think it's time to wrap up. Thank you so much.
Yeah.